Hello, I'm Brenda Wood. We're back again with another interview. I am interviewing John Stanyan today. He is a former police chief and a former police officer, and we're going to discuss what it's like to be a police officer, what it was like then, and what his opinion of it would be like now, and his viewpoints on incarceration. So, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were a police chief, and a little bit about your cop life?
Let's see, I started in law enforcement. Well, I grew up in law enforcement. My dad was a LA County deputy sheriff, and we moved to Kansas in '89, and I had completed the academy in California, and we just decided we weren't going to raise our kids in Los Angeles, and so we moved to Kansas in '89.
Big difference.
Yeah, and in 1990, I joined Leavenworth Police Department as a reserve police officer, and then in '91, I went full time with the police department, and then in '92, or no, in the late '91, the police chief and I had a difference of opinion, and I guess it was '92, yeah, November of '92, and we parted ways. I guess is a nice way of putting it. And then I took a job as chief of police in Chase, Kansas.
Even smaller town.
Yeah, it was a small town. I had one reserve, well, two reserves. Technically, I had a reserve police officer that worked with me, and then I had a assistant chief that was kind of a buddy of mine that from Great Bend Police Department, and we were there almost 5 years, and our son had been born, and we were making multiple trips back and forth to St. Louis, and my assistant chief actually took the chief's job in Edwardsville, Kansas, and offered me to come back up there because it split our drive about in half and had more family here to be able to deal with the girls when we were in St. Louis with our son. And so I went to work there, and then.
What's it like being a police officer? Can you tell me what the average day looks like?
Best description I've ever heard is about 7 hours and 59 minutes of sheer boredom and about 1 minute of sheer terror.
What's your most terrifying thing you've encountered?
Probably two things. The first one was I've been working for about a week, 2 weeks as a full-time police officer for Leavenworth, and I came as close as I ever want to come to killing a man one day.
Oh my.
And on a Beretta 92F, the hammer on it locks back once, locks back a second time, and then when it falls to the third, it drops the hammer. And we had a guy that was outside the courthouse that was shooting at a house across the street, and my partner and I got the call, and we rolled up, we got out of the car, and my partner was on the outside of the cars, and I was on the inside of the cars, and we were approaching him, of course, guns drawn, and yelling at him, put the gun down, and he was leaning on the roof of a car, and he started coming off the roof of the car with the gun out, and he got to fairly close to where my partner was with the barrel of the gun, and I started squeezing the trigger. And because if he had gotten very, very much further, basically, I'd have shot him. And he finally put the gun down, and when I ran up to put him in handcuffs, I put my gun back in my holster, and I was trying to lock the top strap on it. I couldn't get it to lock. Then went ahead and put him in handcuffs, and a couple of deputies ran over from the jail across the street and grabbed a hold of him, and I figured out why I couldn't get my top strap, because it was on the second lock on the hammer.
Oh my goodness.
So, but, and then probably the hardest night I ever had was the night a buddy of mine was shot. And scared the crap out of me. He lived, luckily, but I was working, and when the kid that reserve, it was when I was out in western Kansas, and the reserve heard the call. Of course, we all heard the call on the radio, but something just didn't sound right. So the kid got out. He was at his house about a block and a half away, or a block away, and it just didn't sound right. So he got out, and he was approaching where Rick had done traffic stop. And just as he got there, the kid fired 2 rounds at Rick, one hitting him, and but he started screaming on the radio for me to get down there, and I couldn't understand what was going on. I knew something was wrong, I was already, I'd been standing out on the street there in downtown Chase, and I heard he jumped in my car and started heading that way, and I finally got him to calm down enough on the radio to tell me there was shots fired and officer down. And I don't remember the 13-mile drive from Chase to Sterling, but I know I did it in 11 minutes. Probably one of the most supportive things I've ever seen, though. There were Great Bend police officers rolling up, Hutchinson police officers. We had 8 troopers there within 10-15 minutes. We were getting calls from Kansas City Police Department, Colorado Springs, Wichita, Oklahoma City.
So lots of support.
Lots of support. I mean, because those things skip along radios. And, you know, one department will hear it, and they'll pass it on to the next department, and pass it on to the next department, because at the time when the call came out, we didn't know whether the suspect was still loose or what. But as it turns out, Rick had fired 7 rounds back at him after being shot, and as he was falling, and hit him 5 out of 7 rounds, and the kid actually lived after being shot 5 times. But none of them were life-threatening shots, but he didn't fire any more rounds at Rick.
But it could have been.
It
for both of them.
Could have been real ugly for both of them. Yeah.
So the next questions that I'm going to ask you, because you've been a police officer, you have arrested many people. You've probably had to go to court and testify. So you can have a very open mind on incarceration. You also have had some friends that's been arrested. Would you explain what your opinion is of the judicial system from a cop's view only right now?
Very flawed, but still probably the best system in the world. You know, at least you have an opportunity to present both sides, where in most countries you don't have that opportunity. But it's still got major issues.
Do you think that it was fair?
Yes and no. I mean, it's kind of one of those, my opinion used to be that, you wouldn't be there if you didn't do something wrong.
Right.
And I still think as a whole picture that's true.
Sure.
But I think as far as the process, we no longer have a legal system. We have a bargaining system, because in all the years that I was a policeman, I really went to trial 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And all the people that I arrested, but the rest of it's are plea bargains, and it's basically you get public defenders, and they're not attorneys anymore. They're plea brokers, is what I call them. I mean, that's all they are. They're just, they're plea brokers. So,
do you feel that the sentences that are passed down portray the crime that's been committed?
No, and you can spend life in prison for selling marijuana and be out in 15, 20 years after killing somebody. No, there's an imbalance there, a dramatic imbalance of crime versus sentencing, and it's whatever the popular hot topic is at the time.
What do you think it's like for somebody coming out of prison trying to re-enter the community?
Oh, it's hard. I mean, because people they tend to have a very focused view that says, you're a dirtbag or you're a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't look at what actually happened. So they formulate opinions just based on what you were accused of. And so it's hard to get a job. It's, I know people that still struggle. I mean, when we had PCI, that's one of the things that we did was try to give some of those people an opportunity to get back in the workforce, because there just aren't a lot of people that are willing to go. People make mistakes. I mean, and they do stupid things. That doesn't mean that they're going to continue to do those.
So do you believe in second chances?
Yeah.
Do you believe that people can change?
Yeah.
Do you feel that the public can weigh in on helping lawmakers change some of this?
Oh yeah. I mean, one of the things that I did when I was chief, I was part of the Kansas Legislative Committee, and that we influenced or lobbied different laws and stuff at the time. It happened to be when the concealed carry was kind of coming about, and we lobbied pretty hard against it, just not because we didn't want people to be able to carry firearms. It was because of the way they were writing the law.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it was going to be, you could just walk in and take class and then carry a concealed weapon.
Yes.
Where we as police officers had to go basically qualify 3 times a year to meet standards, and to carry a firearm. And it's like you get the general public who hasn't had
no training,
all of the training.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even at the time, and it's more now, but even at the time that I became a police officer, when the academy in California was 692 hours that I had to be in training before I could be certified to become a police officer. And basically here it was the same thing. I mean, and now it's longer than that. You know, it's out to, I think, 10 months now that they're having to do training. You
Yes.
know, and so
When you've seen somebody that you've arrested and they go to court, and you know this person has committed a crime, and I am an activist for the incarcerated, but I am also a believer that if you've done the crime, you should do your time and you know, take your punishment. However, I do feel that our system does, like you said, it's a plea bargain, lets a lot of people down, and it lets a lot of people off that it shouldn't, and it keeps people that it longer than it should. However, do you feel as a police officer that you've went into court and you've had to testify, and then this person gets off on a technicality? If you ever had that happen, and you know they committed the crime.
it hasn't happened to me personally, but I mean, I think if everybody's doing their job the way they should be, those don't happen very often. But the sad part about it is we've got a system that's full of people that don't do their job right. You know, if they, you know, dot all the T's, cross all the I's, or, you know, they don't, that doesn't happen, you know, and it just kind of,
Is it annoying as a police officer to see somebody take a lesser plea to a crime that was a worser crime that you know they committed?
you know, I guess I really never thought about it that way. I mean, my job wasn't to convict them or to sentence them. My job was to find out what they did, prove what they did, and then get them to that part of the system and let them deal with them.
So with that being said, how do you feel about prosecutors? Do you think that they are out for blood? Do you think they're out to be fair? Do you think they're out to further their career? Or do you think they're out to just do their job?
They're attorneys. I don't have a very high opinion of attorneys, but
they are attorneys. That is true.
But I think
so are judges.
well, hopefully they're a little more learned than the average public defender, or prosecutor. I think prosecutors are, you know, the problem we have with that is those are elected positions, and they're not there to prosecute people. They're there to be a politician, and you know, it shouldn't be to me, that should not be an elected position. It should be basically a hired position.
So come election time, you think that they are harder on criminals?
Oh yeah, they try to make it out to, you know, if you listen to any of them, oh, I've done this and I've convicted this, and you know, and it's all about being a politician. It's not about being an attorney. You're not representing the people. You're representing yourself.
Yeah, that I can see that. Do you feel that they take the family into consideration, or do you think they just look at the individual?
No, they're looking at the individual. They're looking at the criminal. You know, but they don't. Neither side. They don't look at the criminal's family, nor do they look at, you know, they have a little bit more here recently, but traditionally they haven't looked at the victims' families either. I mean, there's two different sides of that. You know, you have a criminal that has, you know, committed a crime, and they're not looking at how it affects their family, but they also didn't, for the most part, look at how the victim's family is affected by it.
And that could work both ways. If you have a victim who their family wants justice for somebody that's been murdered in their family, or anything in general, and then they get off on a lesser plea, they probably don't feel that our judicial system was fair. And then if you look at it on the criminal side in their family, they're probably looking at it that the judicial system wasn't fair in the other direction.
Right.
So let's skip forward then. Let's say somebody's done their time. You were a police officer that has arrested that person. That person has been convicted. They have signed their plea, basically, and went on to prison, been sentenced. They have done their time. They have been supposedly rehabilitated, if those programs are offered in the prison that they've went to, and now they are released back out to the public. Do you feel that they should suffer for the rest of their life?
No. I mean, when I was a policeman here in Leavenworth, I got to spend the night in a hospital because I had a kid that I went to arrest and was palming a gun, and he proceeded to snap the nasal bone off my skull and at the top of my nose, and to a point where the guy that is now the chief of police here, when he first got there, pronounced me dead. I ran into him in court several years later, and I was there on something else, and ran into him and his mom, and of course he was a gangbanger at the time, and well, he probably still was, but very polite, very, I didn't hold it against him. I mean, it's something that happened in an instant, and I think we all make snap decisions or hasty decisions based on what's going on at the particular time, but you can't hold that against them.
Do you feel that they should be able to have certain rights reinstated when they come out?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I think we give some of them too many rights in prison, but it's once they come out, then they based on the crime. I mean, why we lump too many people into one category.
That's very true.
It's like owning firearms. I mean, if you're a convicted felon, you can't own a firearm. Well, what if that thing, whatever you were convicted of, had nothing to do with a firearm
or violence?
Then why limit? Why limit that? Or
especially when the Constitution says we have the right to protect ourselves.
Right. Well, and then you have stupid stuff that occurs. You get a 17 or an 18-year-old kid, has sex with his 16-year-old girlfriend or 17-year-old girlfriend, and winds up going to prison over it, which I think completely ludicrous to begin with, but nevertheless. But then he's got to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life.
Yes.
And it's like we don't. And then he's branded that for the rest of his life, when it's something that 99.9% of us have done. I mean,
And it's not a rape, and it's not child molestation. It's not a violent act of a sexual assault.
Yeah, it was consensual, so where's the crime? Especially with the age of consent in the state of Kansas is 16. Well, if she's 17, how can mom and dad come back and say, oh no, we want him prosecuted? she consented. So how is that a crime? You know, we don't.
Do you think the law is very gray in certain areas?
Oh God, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of gray in our
Mm-hmm.
laws.
What about voting rights?
Oh, what effect does that have on being a convicted criminal? What
There's
effect
some
does
states that don't allow it.
and it's like, what effect does that have on your ability to rationalize whether this politician or that politician is going to do what's best for their constituents, whether it be a city councilman or a president. What bearing does that have on that? I mean,
this is true. That's my feeling. I have to ask a question now. Talk to me about dirty cops.
they're there. I mean, I don't think that any cop ever goes into the job planning on being there. You wind up with a lot more of them in areas where there's heavy influence of organized crime, narcotics, those kind of things. But I don't think they go in with that intent, and it's a lot less now than it used to be. I mean, it's as far as dirty cops. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what I consider a dirty cop is a guy on take or out committing crimes or whatever, because it happened more in yesteryears just because cops don't get paid very much. I mean, you're out there. One of the things that when I became a cop is I made sure that I kissed my wife and my kids goodbye every day, because
Didn't know if you were coming home.
yeah, I mean, and I buried a lot of my friends that didn't come home.
I don't think the public understands that side of being a cop. I think they think of him as always being the person that either comes to the rescue, depending on which side you're looking at, or the bad guy that puts their loved ones in jail.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very dangerous job.
Yeah.
And it is a needed job.
Yeah, I mean, it's a necessary. I hate to use the word, but it's a necessary evil, because we have anarchy if we don't. It's like the whole thought process of, well, let's defund the police. Well, okay, who are you going to call when your house gets broken into?
Or somebody's trying to beat on you.
Yeah, it's my problem with all this garbage that's going on now, is that they're forgetting that that's the first call you make when something goes wrong, but they're the first people you want to hate when it doesn't go your way.
Right.
There are cops out there that don't belong being cops. I mean, doesn't you look at George Floyd. There was no reason that man had to die. I mean, granted, he probably wasn't the most upstanding citizen in the world, but nothing that he had done warranted him dying. Should that guy have been a cop? Probably not.
Because you think he had some anger issues?
I don't know what the underlying. I mean, I do know that he had 17 complaints filed against him previous to the Floyd incident. That bears some looking at if you're an administrator. I have a unique position to be able to look at it from an administrator's point of view and a street cop's
Because you were both.
Because I was both. And not all cops get that opportunity, but, from an administrator's point of view, it something was wrong there, whether, and it hadn't been dealt with.
And I think social media expands on things now where it didn't in the past.
I think they blow it up.
Right.
Blow it out of proportion. Should George Floyd died? No. But it wouldn't, I guess it drives me nuts that the media makes a big deal out of that. And it's, we saw that video how many times, in, going back to Rodney King, how many times did we see that video? But when was the last time they repeatedly played the video of a policeman getting shot and killed?
They're not going to.
No, because they're political agencies. I'm not a big fan of the media.
And it is election year for a big election.
Mm-hmm.
How can we get in touch with people to have them step up, stand for what they believe in, and move forward in helping others to do the same when it comes to cops or felons or anything in general? What is your opinion that the public can do to help change, to make things better?
Well, first of all, I mean, when we find that in law enforcement, when we find that there's a bad seed in there, we need to get rid of it. It needs to be dealt with. But then all the way through the legal system, we need to be more cognizant of our laws. I mean, if people aren't familiar enough with how the political process works for enacting laws, you may want to pass a bill or create a law that says, it's illegal to spit on the sidewalk. Well, but the problem with that is that's not the only thing in that bill.
Right. They add to it.
There is so many, there's an expansive list of other stuff that's attached to that.
So when it gets passed, everything else gets passed with it.
You're not just passing the you can't spit on the sidewalk law. You're passing all this other legislation that goes along with it.
Have you seen politicians, and I'm speaking from just things I have witnessed and heard, where a politician says, I am for prison reform. And they state this, they run for office, but then they send out texts or make comments about people being felons or thieves or murderers or whatever back when they're behind closed doors.
Mm-hmm.
What is your opinion on politicians like that in office? I mean, my opinion is if you're going to believe in something, you believe in it, you stand on it, you run for it, and you make it happen. But when you have somebody that has a front and then is completely different in the background.
That happens all the time. They're politicians. They get paid to lie.
You're not a politician fan, huh?
No. I mean, the old joke, how you know when a politician's lying? His mouth's moving.
Oh my goodness.
But, that's we've moved away from, unfortunately in our society, we've moved away from people running for political office because they want...
For the people, by the people.
Yeah,
It's
we're no longer for the people, by the people.
Right.
It's for me, by me.
Right. Paycheck.
Yeah. We need to start with reform of our political system, and putting term limits on, these people and it's going to stop the career politicians. We need to stop the point of view that, once you're in office, you get, we get politicians, you go spend one term, and you get paid that same pay for the rest of your life. You get medical benefits, you get all the benefits that go along with it for the rest of your life. And
they no longer care about the people.
Right. They're going, hey, I'm sitting pretty.
Regardless if they get elected again or not.
Right. They're still getting a paycheck. So, I think if we start there and we reform that, then we're going to get back to the for the people, by the people.
Because even our judicial system starts with the politicians.
Right. Right. Because the laws are created by politicians.
Right.
And we need to stop being a reactive society.
How do you feel about calling politicians out that you have caught in a lie?
It needs to happen, but problem is, 9 times out of 10, that if it's not, the media has too much influence on our politics and our belief system, whether it be social media or mass media. We've gone to, the old thought process, it's on the internet, it's got to be true. No, that's not true. Do your research, find out what really lies behind, because with every story, there's backstory. There's other things that are involved.
This is true. I like to tell people that perception is reality, but it doesn't mean it's true.
Right. If you're going to go after somebody for something, or call them out on something, make sure you have all the facts.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because we tend to fall into that, so-and-so said, and so-and-so said, and so-and-so said, so it's got to be,
And you might not even know who so-and-so is.
Right. And that's, know what you're talking about before you go out and talk about it. Do the background, do the time, but we've become such a society that, I saw it on the internet, check the facts, because...
Well, that's very good advice. All right, well, we will bring this to a close. Thanks for meeting with me, and appreciate your viewpoint and your opinions, and thanks for being an officer and serving, and look forward to maybe touching base again later. Thanks.